Welcome to the deep dive. We've had some really interesting material shared with us from English Voice Club.
Yes, the piece on small talk.
Exactly. And today we want to really dig into that, get under the skin of this everyday thing we do.
Right. Why do we even bother with it?
Yeah, what's actually happening when we chat about, I don't know, the weather? And importantly, how can people feel a bit more confident doing it?
Good questions. Because whether you're networking or just meeting someone new.
Or even just bumping into a neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. Having a handle on it helps. So this deep dive should offer some useful, practical insights, hopefully.
Let's hope so.
It is funny, though, isn't it? Small talk. We do it all the time, but it can feel...
awkward. Maybe a bit pointless sometimes.
Yeah, pointless is a word that comes up. But this material, it starts with a really simple definition.
Okay.
It's just simple conversation. The topic itself, not really the main thing. And you keep details kind of minimal.
Like those classic openings. Hey, how's life?
Good, thanks. You know the drill. We've all done it a million times.
Okay, but let's tackle that pointless idea head on, because I think many of us do sometimes think, ugh, do we have to do this?
Right.
But the source material suggests that being, super interesting isn't the main objective here.
Exactly. That's not the primary goal.
So if it's not about impressing people with our amazing stories, what is it really for? What's the social function?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. The text points out its core purpose is basically showing friendliness and showing you're interested in the other person.
Okay, friendliness and interest makes sense.
But there's another layer, too. It's subtly says something about your relationship or lack thereof, specifically about social level.
Social level, how so?
Think about when small talk often disappears, like a manager giving orders to an employee.
Right. No, how was your weekend first?
Or a teacher formally addressing a class. Or, a police officer dealing with someone they've stopped.
Ah, okay. In those situations, there's a clear hierarchy.
Precisely. And the small talk tends to drop away, or it's very minimal.
That's a really fascinating angle. So the absence of that light, easy chat can actually signal a power difference.
It often does, yeah.
So conversely, when we do engage in it, when we ask about the weather or whatever, we're sending a different signal. What's that signal?
According to this material, the message underneath is something like, hey, we're on the same level here, we can be friendly.
We're equals, let's chat.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It establishes that comfortable, informal connection. And let's be honest, there's a more immediate payoff, too.
Which is?
It's just a great way to avoid silence. Those awkward gaps that can make everyone feel a bit edgy.
Definitely. The dreaded awkward silence. So it's a social lubricant, really.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we get what it is and why it's actually more significant than we might casually assume. Now, the English Voice Club stuff gives some really concrete starting points, those questions from their example dialogue.
Yes, the how's life ones.
How's life? What have you been up to recently, and what's new with you? They seem simple.
They are simple.
But the text says explicitly, remember these, use these. Why are these ones highlighted as being so effective for kicking things off?
Well, I think it's because they strike a good balance. They're broad, right? So the other person isn't pinned down.
They can answer in lots of ways.
Exactly. But they're not so broad, like tell me about yourself, that the person freezes up. They invite a short, fairly general reply.
Which is what you want at the start.
Right. It's low pressure, a gentle way to put out a feeler, see if they're open to talking more.
Like testing the water. Okay, so after those initial feelers, the material gets into common topics. First up, where people are from.
Hometowns, yeah.
Yeah.
There's that dialogue example, someone from Romania, someone whose family moved to Mexico.
Right. What makes that exchange work well as small talk based on the analysis?
Well, a few things kind of jump out. The initiating questions are very straightforward. Things anyone can use. Are you from around here? Where are you from? Are you local? Simple stuff.
Easy enough.
Then, when the person shares a specific detail, like being born in Romania but growing up somewhere else.
That gives you something to latch onto.
Right. It opens the door for natural follow-ups. Like, oh, Bucharest, is that where you're from originally? Or, what's that part of Romania like?
And the text makes a specific point about using the actual city name in the follow-up, like asking, what's Timisoara like? Why? Is that little detail important?
It just shows you were actually listening,
Paying attention?
Yeah. And it makes the connection slightly more personal than just a generic, what's your hometown like? It shows specific interest.
Okay. Little things matter.
And the sample answers they give are good, too. I was born in X, but I've been living here for a while now. They're short. Give info, but don't overshare.
Keeps it moving.
And crucially, the material hammers home this point about balance. You ask, but you also share a bit about yourself.
Right, it's not an interrogation.
It has to be a two-way street, a give and take.
Definitely. It's a conversation. Okay, next common topic. Free time, hobbies, weekend plans. The example uses tennis, housework, and wild swimming.
Wild swimming, yeah. Bit more unusual, maybe.
And the go-to question highlighted is just any weekend plans. Why is that such a reliable one?
Well, almost everyone has weekends or some kind of time off, so most people can answer it somehow.
Even if it's just not much, relaxing?
Exactly. And even that gives you an opening. Oh, sounds nice. Busy week. It's generally positive, forward-looking.
Okay. And the dialogue shows how to ask about a more specific hobby, like that wild swimming example. They suggest asking, how did you get into that?
Yeah, and the text clarifies what that really means. It's like asking what sparked your interest, or how did you start doing it?
That clarification is useful. It's not asking for their life story, just the origin.
Right, and then the suggestion to follow up with, have you ever tried it? That's flagged as a good way to keep the conversation going. Well, it directly invites the other person to share their experience, or lack of it, which might uncover, another connection. Oh, no, I prefer running. Or, yeah, I tried it once.
So even if the interests are different, like swimming versus running in the example, it keeps the exchange going. You can compare notes.
Precisely. It's about weaving those threads, finding little points of contact, even if they're points of contrast. Keeps the interaction alive.
Okay, got it. Now, the next topic the material covers is family. And here there's a big flashing warning sign about cultural sensitivity.
Yes, that's a really crucial point they make.
Why is family such a potentially tricky area for small talk? Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. The source points out, quite rightly, that asking things like, are you married? Or do you have kids? Can feel really personal, maybe even invasive in some cultures, especially when you've only just met.
What feels normal and light in one place might be totally inappropriate somewhere else.
Exactly. So the advice they give seems very sensible. Maybe wait for the other person to bring up their family first.
Let them open the door.
Yeah, it's just a more considerate, respectful approach to potential cultural differences or personal boundaries.
Makes sense. So if the topic comes up, the dialogue gives some example questions, like, you have nephews and nieces, or how many siblings do you have?
Or even the more direct confirmation check, you don't have kids.
Right. But what I found really insightful here was the way the text broke down the different kinds of questions we use in small talk. It wasn't something I'd consciously thought about before.
Yes, that was a great breakdown. It distinguishes between, say, a real request for new information.
Like, how many siblings are there? You probably don't know the answer.
Right, versus questions that are more about checking information you might already suspect or just seeking confirmation.
Like the you have nephews and nieces example. You might have heard them mention it.
And then there's a third type, questions that are mainly there to signal a change of topic, like what about the rest of your family?
Okay, so information gathering, confirming, and topic shifting. Why is knowing this distinction actually helpful for someone trying to get better at small talk?
Because it underscores that the process of talking, of keeping the interaction going, is often more important than the specific facts being exchanged. Those confirmation questions, for instance, even if you kind of guess the answer, they prompt the other person to talk, to elaborate a bit. It keeps the conversational ball in the air.
And the topic shifting ones give you a smooth exit ramp if one subject's running out of steam.
Exactly. It helps you manage the flow without it feeling awkward or abrupt. Understanding these functions helps you navigate more smoothly.
That's a really subtle but powerful point. It's less about fact-finding, more about maintaining that comfortable social rhythm.
Well put.
Okay, the last specific topic area was shared interests, using sports as the example, football versus basketball. What's the key lesson from that exchange?
I think the crucial thing there is how expressing a slightly different interest can actually be a good thing.
How so?
Well, the example has someone say, not really a football fan. I do like watching basketball, though. But I like this other thing is key.
Instead of just no.
Right. A simple no can just stop the conversation cold, a dead end, but offering an alternative.
Gives the other person something new to potentially connect with.
Exactly. And in the dialogue, it works. They find that shared interest in basketball, and suddenly the conversation gets more engaging. They even float the idea of watching a game together sometime.
It builds a bridge. Okay. And this seems to lead into the bigger picture, right? Small talk isn't really the end goal in itself.
No, not at all. It's not meant to be this endless loop of, how about that weather?
Mm. So what is the goal then, according to this source?
The text is clear. It's a starting point, a stepping stone. The aim is usually to move towards a deeper conversation.
And deeper here means?
Basically, a conversation you're both genuinely interested in, where you actually want to hear what the other person thinks or has to say.
Not just going through the motions.
Right. And finding that common ground, like the basketball example, that's the key way you get from the initial small talk to something more substantial.
So it's like reconnaissance. You're scouting the social terrain for shared interests.
That's a nice way to think about it, yeah. A social scouting mission.
Okay. And finally, the material brings up cultural differences again. Why is being aware of these variations so important? We touched on it with family.
Well, it applies more broadly, too. What's considered polite, normal small talk can really vary.
Like what specifically?
Things like personal space, how close you stand, the kinds of questions deemed okay for a first chat, how direct people are. It can all differ quite a lot.
So being mindful helps avoid accidentally causing offense or just awkwardness.
Definitely, especially if you're interacting with people from different backgrounds. It just helps things go more smoothly. The text encourages listeners to think about how all this compares to their own cultural norms.
It really drives home that while maybe the basic human need to connect is universal,
the way we actually do it, the specific scripts and etiquette we follow in those first interactions, can be very culturally shaped.
Okay, so let's try and summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive into the English Voice Club material. Small talk. It's not just filler.
No, it's a valuable tool. It shows you're open, friendly.
It signals you see the other person as sort of an equal on a social level.
Right, and it's that crucial first step, the way you find common ground to potentially build a more meaningful conversation later.
It's about discovering those shared interests.
Exactly. And maybe it's worth thinking about, in your own life.
Yeah.
How consciously are you using small talk? Are you just going through the motions?
Or are you actually listening for those little openings, those clues that could lead somewhere more interesting?
Yeah. Are you actively scouting?
That's a great question for people to reflect on, and maybe one final thought to leave our listeners with.
One?
Thinking about those cultural nuances we discussed, how might getting a better handle on those differences not just improve your chats with people from elsewhere, but maybe also give you a richer understanding of all the different social dynamics playing out around you every day, even in your own culture?
That's definitely something to mull over, how understanding the differences sharpens your view of the familiar.
Something to think about. Well, thanks for diving deep with us today on the art of small talk.
My pleasure. It was interesting to unpack it.